So winter is coming. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Nicole, for those of you that don't know me. And whether it's your first winter in the Netherlands or Europe, or whether it's your 50th, I really hope that today I'm going to be able to empower you to not just get through the winter, but emerge from your cocoon like a butterfly in springtime. So that is my wish and my hope. So overwintering, I really like that term. You know, it conjures up for me like, you know, getting through the winter, and it conjures up this image of a bear hibernating. So for me, winter is a season for rest and retreat. Hibernation comes to mind, introspection, recovery they all come to mind for me. So how do we embrace this season? These are my webinar goals. I'd like to prepare you for the winter months and to give you perhaps a new perspective as well, but mainly to prepare you with a combination of interventions, knowledge, diet, and lifestyle, but also inform you about circadian rhythm and circadian nutrients. Hopefully, I will also provide you with some helpful hacks that will aid your body's resilience to help your mood and your immunity. So these are the themes that I hope to cover. For everyone that knows me well, won't be surprised by the first one, the connection to nature, circadian rhythm, vitamin D, and then our neurotransmitter hormone group, serotonin, melatonin, oxytocin, cortisol. I'll cover those in a bit as well. And then I'll also talk about plant-based nutrition and the role of polyphenols, what they are and what they can do for us. So that is what I hope to cover. We are nature. That is one of my favorite phrases at the moment. Living in alignment with nature and having a mindful connection to nature can be powerfully health-giving. We are connected to nature through different rhythms. For example, the planetary cycle, the movement of the planets and the Earth around the sun, which result in our seasons. The lunar cycle, which cause the tides, and the circadian rhythm, which is responsible for our day and our night. On the other side of the spectrum, I think that disconnection from nature is something that we don't often acknowledge. So our modern world and lifestyle often disconnects and separates us from nature. I'm talking about things like exposure to artificial light at night, which disrupts our circadian rhythm. I'm talking about things like birth control pills that suppresses our menstrual cycles. And I'm talking about eating that at night stresses our peristalsis in our gut. So I just wanted to also briefly mention something in my preparation. I came across some research that was talking about the scientists were suggesting that we rename metabolic syndrome. And so for those of you that don't know, metabolic syndrome is a cluster of comorbidities. It's a cluster of illnesses that include diabetes, heart disease, cognitive decline, sleep disturbance, fatty liver. And the researchers have found that there is a connection with disrupted circadian rhythms in metabolic syndrome, and they suggest that we rename metabolic syndrome circadian syndrome. So this is not the first time, I'm sure, the last time we'll be hearing about the circadian rhythm. So what is a circadian rhythm? It's a natural, external and internal process that regulates our sleep-wake cycle and repeats every 24 hours. So in a sense, it's our body clock. And it's this body clock that responds to environmental cues as well. So as you can see from the image, the circadian rhythm is basically a predetermined timetable in every cell and organ in our body. And this timetable helps the cells and the organs perform their activities over a 24-hour period. So it's all organized. And then we have the field of circadian biology, which is the biology of your body as it is affected by the cycles of dark and light and nighttime and daytime. So when we're talking about circadian biology, we're talking also about the things that influence circadian biology or our body clock. And these are time givers, Zeitgebers, or timekeepers. So the main timekeepers are light, temperature, feeding, activity, and social connection. These all influence our body clock and basically play a role in keeping it, keeping the timing going. So the Zeitgebers are time givers that inform our clock genes and keep us tethered to our circadian rhythm. So this is where we need to work when it comes to winter blues and seasonal affective disorder. If you're looking for lifestyle and preventative solutions, we need to look at modifying and being in touch with what these timekeepers are. This is another slide that explains how the external clock is related to our internal clock and vice versa. So the light and the darkness inform our master clock through the retina of our eye. It informs our master clock, which then synchronizes with the rest of the body. And the rest of the body will play their own parts. For instance, the brain will play its part. The pineal gland will produce melatonin, and the organs will do their metabolism and play the important roles of immunity and inflammation. So these cycles and rhythms, both outside in nature, they basically communicate with the endogenous circadian rhythms that happen within us. So food and meals and eating is a timekeeper, a Zeitgeber, and that's what this word chrononutrition means. It's basically clock nutrition. So when you want to be healthy, and if you're looking at mood, foods do play a big role in mood, but it's not just what we eat, it's also when we eat that is important. So for example, healthy food at the wrong time can almost be like junk food. For example, eating it at night, your food is not digested or moved effectively because your gut thinks that it's time to rest. And that can cause what they call a food hangover in the morning, where you wake up and you're not hungry or you feel sluggish. And so, yes, when it comes to chrononutrition, it's all of these three things are important: food quality, food quantity, and food or meal timing. I'm sure everybody's heard of this time-restricted eating, but perhaps in more of a colloquial term, intermittent fasting. So time-restricted eating is basically eating within a restricted time frame. So our circadian rhythm also follows food timing cues, and the ideal feeding window is an 8 to 12 hour feeding window in daylight hours. So for instance, one could have a 12-hour feeding window in summer and an 8-hour feeding window in winter. And that's basically the time when you take in all solid and liquid foods. And you could fit that and adjust that according to the season as best you can. So what the research is saying about this topic is that time-restricted eating plus decreased caloric intake improves longevity by 35%. If you're interested in reading more about this topic, there's an excellent book out. It's called The Circadian Code by Dr. Sachin Panda. So you can check that out. But what is happening behind the seasonal shifts? What is actually happening in the body on a neuroendocrine level? So with regards to your nervous system and your hormones. So less sunlight means less serotonin, which causes low mood. Shorter days mean more melatonin, which can cause you to feel sluggish. Cooler temperatures cause more cortisol because your body perceives that as stress, and it can cause anxiety. And because the weather's colder and we don't go out as much, the social isolation reduces oxytocin, and that also causes stress and anxiety. So when you think of the winter blues and you think of what kind of interventions might be useful, we really need to look at, which hormones are being involved. Sometimes it's all four of them, and then address them. And I'll get into exactly how we can do that a little bit later on. So maybe it's just the winter blues, and maybe it's the complete sort of full diagnosis of seasonal affective disorder that you're dealing with, or maybe it's somewhere in between. Essentially, seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a form of depression, usually happening between the fall and winter periods. It's diagnosed by a psychiatric assessment by a psychologist or psychiatrist, and it's a formal diagnosis that occurs with significant loss of socioeconomic functionality. The symptoms are depression, lasting feelings of hopelessness, sadness, disinterest in one's enjoyable things, cravings for high carbohydrate foods or sugar, and subsequent weight gain. Both of those symptoms speak to me about low serotonin levels, difficulty with concentrating and focus, social isolation, that's the oxytocin, sleep disturbance, that's the melatonin. So there's a lot going on with seasonal affective disorder. And if you're not sure, if you feel like this is you and you're not able to function and work, then you need to seek psychological help while you implement all of this that I'm going to be recommending you. Okay, so seasonal changes. Some seasonal variation in health is normal. There's a seasonal variation when it comes to heart rate variability, body temperature, even hair growth and hair loss have their own, have seasonal variation, which are completely normal. So one has to kind of bear that in mind and be flexible and flex and flow with the seasonal changes. But it is important to know that, for instance, certain illnesses undergo seasonal flares. And so if you know, for instance, if you have an autoimmune condition, then usually in late winter and early spring, often people with autoimmunity experience a seasonal flare of their symptoms. And this happens because endogenous levels of melatonin and vitamin D are at their lowest. So you can preempt that by monitoring your vitamin D levels and intervening with meaningful dosages right from now even, and perhaps looking at where the melatonin is also necessary. So even the viruses have go through seasonal activity, or seasons when there's more activity. And so, for instance, if you get the flu at season change, and you recover in, a couple of days, I think that's pretty normal. But if you get the flu and you 2 weeks later you're still trying to recover, then you need to look at what's going on underneath. And would be surprised if there wasn't a problem with nutritional status and things like vitamin D levels. So we need to, when it comes to these long, dark months ahead, this European winter, we need to really be quite adept at adapting to change. And so we need to look at our behaviors and habits and modify them. If we can, adapt our schedules and activities. Your body clock anticipates your next activity, so be consistent with changes that you make. The practice of time-restricted eating is something I already mentioned. And the other thing with regards to adapting and change is being aware of and informed as to which foods are in season. So try to select as much of a diverse, colorful selection of mainly in-season plant foods to complement your proteins. Okay, so I just want to talk here briefly about some work that the nutrition scientist Deanna Minich has been educating the functional medicine community about. And she calls it the Triad of nutrients. So this is the circadian, lunar, and seasonal nutrients. And these nutrients are substances which help the body stay in sync with natural rhythms. And surprise, surprise, here are a couple of the nutrients that I've already mentioned. So vitamin D, the sunshine hormone, is a circadian nutrient. Melatonin is a lunar nutrient. And the polyphenols, which are the plant chemicals that occur naturally in many fruits, vegetables, herbs, and spices, are the seasonal nutrients. So when it comes to food and nutrition, in some cases supplementation, and looking to flex and flow with the seasons, including getting through the winter blues, paying attention to these circadian nutrients can really help us stay in sync. And by staying in sync, we stay optimally well, mentally and physically. So briefly, I think that most of the Dutch population is extremely well educated about vitamin D. Vitamin D is the sunshine hormone, and we make it in our skin when we're exposed to a pinking dose of sunlight. So how much vitamin D you make depends on your age, how much skin is covered, and your skin tone. With sunblock and with arms and legs exposed, your skin will make 10,000 to 15,000 units of vitamin D in one pinking exposure. So that's the time it takes for your skin to go pink. Sunblock with an SPF of 15 or higher blocks 100% of vitamin D production in the skin. So that is also a consideration. So depending on the latitude at which you live, you may only get enough radiation from the sun for vitamin D production between May and October. And where we are in the Netherlands, this applies to us. So from November until April, the angle at which the sun strikes the earth is too oblique for us to get enough of this radiation in order to generate the vitamin D production in our skins. So we need to consider food sources and supplementation starting ASAP. The darker your skin, the more sun you need to make the vitamin D. So that's also a consideration. So in those winter months, your food sources, your best food sources, if you're not supplementing, I always recommend that you get your nutrients from food first. So you need to be eating things like fatty fish, fish liver oil in supplement form, beef liver and egg yolks. Milk and breakfast cereals are often fortified with vitamin D as well. So the effects of vitamin D are that it is immune modulating and bone building. Frank deficiency occurs in rickets in children, which is soft bones and causes deformity when children in their growing years have a vitamin D deficiency. And in adults, a vitamin D deficiency is you get osteoporosis. So that is frank deficiency. What we're talking about here today generally and often relates to suboptimal levels. And so these suboptimal levels can increase many disease risks. Depression is one of them, but many other diseases. If your vitamin D levels are suboptimal, you increase your risk for getting colon cancer, for instance, heart attack, high blood pressure, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, even schizophrenia and migraines. So, yeah, it's really important to pay attention not just to frank deficiency, but whether your levels are in fact optimal. And here you can buy vitamin D very easily over the counter, and so the population is very well educated to self-medicate, which I think is great. But my feeling is that, what is the best dose for you? I often find that people are taking doses that are generally too low. So I recommend that you test. And now is the time that is probably a good time to visit your house arts and try to get your vitamin D levels tested. And then you can choose good dosage for you for the winter, because most of the common supplements here are something like 400 IUs for adults and 800 IUs for older people and pregnant and lactating women. But as you can see here, there's a sliding scale. Normal dosing of vitamin D depends on your blood levels. So treatment dosages for blood level ranges are mentioned in the slide, and you can see they're quite significantly higher than the 400 and 800 IUs that most people are recommended to take. And don't get me wrong, it might be that is a good dose for you, but a lot of the time people aren't taking near enough. And the benefit of testing is to also make sure you're not taking too much, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it accumulates, and it's actually quite difficult to get toxic levels, but in theory, that is something to be aware of. And if you test, then you can really be accurate about your dosing. All right, so the first circadian nutrient was vitamin D, and now we have the lunar nutrient, which is melatonin, which is a hormone and a neurotransmitter. And I always used to think that melatonin was made in the pineal gland, but now we know that melatonin is actually mostly made in our mitochondria, which is the power station, or the powerhouse of every cell in our body. So every cell in our body makes melatonin, and that really helps us to tune into the circadian rhythm outside of us. And when we can't, for whatever reason, tune into that rhythm outside of us, it really, can cause a lot of disruption. So why would the mitochondria be making melatonin if it wasn't so vital? Circadian entrainment. So melatonin connects us to darkness and connects us to the nighttime. The other thing that it's important to note is that serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. So serotonin is the other neurotransmitter that helps us to learn and helps our memory and helps us to feel happy. So we need enough serotonin in order to make enough melatonin. And it's important for people that been diagnosed with depression and are taking a long-term antidepressant from the SSRI or serotonin reuptake inhibitor class. It's important for them to know that over time, their melatonin may become deficient. A lot of people develop insomnia, and it's usually because of the serotonin, low levels of serotonin leading to the low levels of melatonin. So that's something that I've worked with clients before, and it's just important to know as well. So just to kind of clarify how the trigger for melatonin release is darkness, and how blue light and sunlight actually inhibits melatonin release. So you can see, the eye, light or darkness in the eye then cause a cascade of communication. The suprachiasmatic nucleus and the pineal gland to cause the release of melatonin or the inhibition of melatonin. So yes, melatonin is a sleep hormone, but it's so much more than that. It's also a powerful antioxidant, and it protects neural tissue. So yeah, there are researched benefits, and a lot of them relate to immune modulation as well, from inflammation to cancer to brain health and pain and gut support and improved mood. Melatonin really is far more than just a sleep hormone, and it's also got very useful for jet lag if you to reset your body clock. So it induces sleep very nicely and can be taken symptomatically for jet lag when you're crossing time zones. But the sleep-inducing property of melatonin is fairly superficial, and it's good to kind of really know that it has all these other benefits. In fact, melatonin is often prescribed for people going through cancer treatment, and it's often prescribed for people experiencing long COVID syndrome as well, or any kind of viral syndromes. So that's something that has a real place there as well. Okay, and so the third part of the triad is the polyphenols, and this is where we get to plants. So plants connect us to nature as food, as medicine, and as inspiration. Eating in season is probably one of the best, besides timing of your meals. Eating in season is another really powerful step that you can take to supporting your circadian rhythm and boosting your mood and immunity over the winter months. So be attentive and informed as to what is in season. You can do this by going to farmers markets. You can also do this by just looking at labeling in stores. So what we want to do is try to avoid overabundance out of season foods. And what comes to mind here is a banana every day. That to me is overabundance of an out of season food. This is not meant to make your life more complicated. It's just more about practicing intentional eating. So essentially, when we eat in season, we also avoid food ruts. So, there's a natural diversity that you create when you eat season produce. So what I'm proposing is that we eat a combination of plants and protein based on the Mediterranean diet, which is basically a plants and protein diet with Mediterranean ingredients. And if you don't live in the Mediterranean, then there's such a thing as a planetarian diet, which is basically this plants and protein concept, but using ingredients that are local to wherever you live. So that's also something which I'm not going to go into too much detail. I have another webinar that speaks to eating well. So this is just focused on the current topic for today. Leafy greens are important for folate. Spices and herbal teas from wild plants, because they contain polyphenols. And so our polyphenols, which I'll explain a little bit more now, are the desired seasonal nutrients that really help through the crosstalk of the microbiome, the gut-brain axis, to help our mood. So I'll explain all of that in detail soon. So in-season produce, foods tend to have a season in which they are at their best. So I'm sure you've noticed. In spring, it's asparagus and strawberries. In summer, it's watermelon. In winter, it's root vegetables, squashes, and pumpkins. For now, broccoli is actually a really good, we're coming to the end of it, but broccoli in summer, autumn months is when it's at its peak in terms of its nutrient content. So often in-season food is also higher in nutrients than produce that's grown in the wrong season under artificial conditions. All right, so here we go, polyphenols. So the polyphenols are the third point to the triad. And these are seasonal nutrients. They vary with the season, and they basically are plant chemicals. So they're the largest category of phytochemicals. And you might recognize the names like resveratrol and quercetin and isoflavones. These are all examples. Catechins from green tea. Isoflavones are from soya. Quercetin is from things like onion. So it's a large category of phytochemicals, and that's probably things that you're eating anyway. But it's good to know that these are even more important to include over these next couple of months. So it's plant foods like grapes, berries, cocoa, coffee, tea, herbs, and spices that are all rich in polyphenols. They're antioxidant and they have anti-inflammatory effects, and they protect against a whole host of neurological conditions. So this is a bit technical here about the effects of the polyphenols for those of you that want more technical information, but otherwise just suffice to say that these are very important nutrient-dense plant chemicals that we need to have in our diets every day. And no one of my webinars is complete without the mention of the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome, this is important because our gut health affects our mental health, our brain health. And 90% of the serotonin in our body is found in the cells lining our GI tract. So the health of our GI tract is paramount if you want to have a good mood, no matter what time of year, but especially in winter. So our inner ecosystem connects with the outer ecosystem through the food we eat. Diversity is depleted, so the actual microbiome diversity can be depleted by things like frequent antibiotics and limited food repertoires. We need diverse colonies of good bacteria to have a healthy ecosystem. They've done research and they've discovered that the gut microbiomes of hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa show seasonal variation. So it really does matter what you eat. And the plant foods and the fiber from plant foods are the prebiotics for these microbes. And they, so you firstly need enough of them, and then basically when you cycle the seasons, so does your gut microbiome cycle with the seasons. So yeah, the polyphenols are like, they communicate with our gut microbiome, and they do this via the gut-brain axis, and they help to, in this way, improve our mood. So this is another very, very important aspect, but I think it brings it all together. All right, so what we want to do is we want to increase serotonin. And how can we do that? So we can do that through sun exposure. We can do that by spending time in nature, through mindfulness, through meditation. Serotonin is made from the essential amino acid tryptophan. And so you can supplement with 5-HTP, L-taurine, and L-theanine. Those are all precursors to tryptophan. Or you can eat tryptophan-rich foods like seafood, chicken, nuts, seeds, and milk to help your body to make more serotonin, therefore more melatonin. So we want to balance melatonin. So essentially, what tends to actually happen is that even though it's winter and we have a shorter day, because we're using artificial light at night and looking at screens before bedtime, even though the day is shorter, and in theory our melatonin should be higher, it's not. And so this is one of the problems and the paradoxes that we sit with living in a modern world. So no matter the time of the year, I think one needs to be attentive to screen time at night and blue light exposure to the eyes at night, because that will suppress melatonin production, and that will make it more difficult for you to fall asleep. So that's why I say we need to balance melatonin. One needs to take stock of whether your system and your habits include blue light at night, and to find ways of addressing that. So I would recommend that you avoid screens and artificial light exposure within 2 hours of bedtime. I know that probably sounds quite hard for most of us. I mean, look at us tonight. We're all sitting in front of a computer. But I'll basically give you some tricks and tips on how that we can make that less painful. One needs to sleep in complete darkness, and one can eat plant foods because plant foods contain melatonin. All plant foods do, but plant foods that are rich in melatonin are things like cherries, oats, and okay, milk's not a plant food, but cherries and oats. And then we need to supplement if appropriate. So essentially, balancing melatonin is one of the ways to help with the winter blues. Just another, because this is really my hobby horses, is blue light exposure. Just another slide on blue light exposure. So it's exposure from natural and or artificial sources in appropriate times that dysregulate your circadian rhythm, just to really drive that fact home. Then we want to balance cortisol. And so for, with the seasonal shift in the weather, temperatures dropping, one needs to keep warm and cover your head and your feet. Balance your blood sugar through regular complete meals and snacks, and avoid or reduce stimulants. These are practices that help you to balance cortisol. And to breathe. When you breathe and you breathe deeply and you focus on your breath, you switch off sympathetic nervous system and you switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, which switches off cortisol. So just, finding some moments in your day to relax and breathe can also help. And then we need to increase oxytocin. So oxytocin is basically our bonding hormone. And if we're cold and not going out, and then we're going to basically feel that social isolation. So one of the things that needs to make a concerted effort to do in winter is to actually plan social interactions and to sign up for exercise or hobby classes over the winter months, spend time with friends, it's hard, but it's something which it's mind over matter. So physical contact with loved ones, get or give a massage, cuddle with a pet, listen to music, acts of Okay, so we're nearing the end in that now I would like to give you things that you can, from tomorrow, take away and start implementing. So during the day, what you can do is bright light on waking. So that can either happen if we have the sun outside, or through a lamp, sun lamp. In fact, the mental health institutions in the Netherlands have a licht cafe, a light cafe, where people with SAD go first thing in the morning and they sit in front of a lamp for 30 minutes. So bright light on waking is essential to switch off melatonin, to improve serotonin. And then daytime sun exposure, whenever there is some sun, then basically, you need to be a sun seeker and seek it out. Something that you can do is to test and supplement your vitamin D. You can also start looking at the timing of your meals and your activities and introduce consistency. Have a look at what's seasonal at the moment, and whenever you're shopping, be adventurous and try new things. If you were connected to the land and farming your own produce, then it would be a totally different story. We would just have that connection with nature and would know what's in season. So for us, it's very difficult because we get produce from all over the world. You have bananas every day of the year, if you wanted to, and so it is more challenging. But this is, like I say, an intentional practice. Try to aim for a diverse range of colorful plant foods and to eat the polyphenol-rich plant foods. I like to have a cook with spices and to have herbal teas because those are extremely, spices and medicinal plants are very concentrated forms of polyphenols. And then your nighttime checklist is to firstly have a fireside ritual. And by that I mean that time of the day between sunset and bedtime. You can just imagine, before we had electricity, what did people do? They would sit around the fireside and talk. Maybe they would sing, maybe they would entertain or be entertained. So those few hours before bedtime, try to look at creating a fireside ritual that gives you social connection. If you can't avoid screens at night, then look at blue light blocking glasses. You can do an internet search and there's lots available. You can also use red light filters in your light bulbs. Apparently, the airline Virgin Atlantic has a red light filter in their airplanes at night, which is nice because that's obviously shows that they're being aware of the circadian disruption that occurs when you travel and all the bright light in the middle of the night. Use an eye mask. I like an eye mask because then at least you can still wake up with the sun, but also block out is ideal. Sometimes with children and certain situations, block out is best, and sometimes using an eye mask works better. So either or. So these are just things that you can start to think about, and gadgets that you can look for or gather. And then there's also personalized treatment options. And this is where constitutional homeopathic treatment, I feel, really can play a significant role in treating people that are prone to SAD. So that involves a homeopathic consult with someone like myself or one of my colleagues, and choosing a remedy that essentially fits you and your symptoms, your unique blueprint, and it essentially helps you to promote your resilience. So that is my treatment. First choice of treatment would be constitutional homeopathic treatment. Then the next thing I would do is I would look more in depth at your vitamin D needs, and also look a little bit more at what are the other minerals and nutrients that you need to give alongside vitamin D for optimal absorption. Usually, and especially if you're taking higher doses, you need to look at your calcium and magnesium and vitamin K. So that's something that I like to take into account as well. Then there's lots of herbal options that can be used. We can look at calming options. We can look at adaptogenic options, and we can look at serotonin support. Some of the herbs you'll recommend, I put in herbs that most people have heard of, like chamomile, valerian, and lavender. It's calming herbs. Ashwagandha as an adaptogenic herb, and then St. John's wort or hypericum, which is very good serotonin support. And for a lot of people that may be worried about taking St. John's wort because they've heard of side effects, the side effects of St. John's wort tend to happen in summer. They don't happen as often in winter. So the photosensitivity, because there's less sun, but also because of the way the herb works. So yeah, there's so many herbal treatments. These just are a few. And then I always look at melatonin. There's a lot of nuance in dosing, and there's also most of what's available at Kruidvat and all the different, online health stores is synthetic. So there are some new products available that are plant-based melatonin. And so, yes, there's a lot of nuance to supplementation in general, and personalization can really help. So that's something that if you, for instance, feeling overwhelmed, then we can work one-on-one. So the webinar in review. So what have we covered? We've covered winter blues. We've covered the triad of circadian nutrients, vitamin D, melatonin, and polyphenols. Adapt food choices to seasons. Gut health and mental health is linked. Pay attention to your gut microbiome, and time-restricted eating. Adapt schedule and habits to seasons, and cultivate an appreciation for what winter has to offer. This is where I can help you, especially if you have a pre-existing condition like a gut issue, thyroid issue, autoimmune issue, mood issues, mood disorders, and you do need a little bit more of a careful approach. Maybe you're on meds, maybe you've struggled before and this isn't a new thing for you, or maybe you're in information overload and overwhelm. So all of those situations I can help with. So with regards to this particular subject, I can also guide you to private testing options and interpretation, and just in general give a very holistic and personalized approach. So feel free to reach out to me, email, via the website, my Facebook community group, or sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to see you there. I just want to end with a bit of seasonal wisdom. It's a quote from my book, Wild Summer. And I just thought I'd share it with you. Thank you to all the people that already have bought my book. I just want to share this piece of seasonal wisdom. Winter is like a death, but it is also like a womb. If you withdraw and hibernate for the cold, dark months, you can harness energy for the next phase. Spring is like a rebirth, a new beginning, and a chance for exponential growth. Summer is abundance, flowers, and fruit. Autumn is maturation, aging, and letting go. There is a time for everything in the circular economy of nature and life. Thank you. These are the books. Wild Spring and Wild Summer are available. The other two are still in creation. So I'm going to love and leave you. It's 8 o'clock on the dot. We've been chatting, well, I've been talking for an hour. If you have anything that you want to ask that you thought of later, please feel free to send me an email and make contact either directly by email or through my booking link. If you're not a client of mine, then feel free to book a free meet and greet. It's nice to sort of chat, and I will tell you whether we're a good fit and whether I can help you. And it's really nice to that chat. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of the evening. Take care. Till next time. Bye.